The wonderful influence of imagination in the cure of diseases is well known. A motion of the hand or a glance of the eye will throw a weak and credulous patient into a fit, and a pill made of bread, if taken with sufficient faith, will operate a cure better than all the drugs in the pharmacopoeia. In the age when alchemy began to fall into some disrepute and learning to lift up its voice against it, a new delusion, based upon this power of imagination, suddenly arose, and found apostles among all the alchemists. Numbers of them, forsaking their old pursuits, made themselves magnetizers. Paracelsus boasted of being able to transplant diseases from the human frame into the earth by means of the magnet. He wrote, "If a person suffer from disease, either local or general, let the following remedy be tried. Take a magnet, impregnated with mummy, and mixed with rich earth. In this earth, sow some seeds that have a congruity or homogeneity with the disease. Then let this earth, well sifted and mixed with mummy, be laid in an earthen vessel, and let the seeds committed to it be watered daily with a lotion in which the diseased limb or body has been washed. Thus will the disease be transplanted from the human body to the seeds which are in the earth. Having done this, transplant the seeds from the earthen vessel to the ground, and wait till they begin to sprout into herbs. As they increase, the disease will diminish, and when they have arrived at their full growth, it will disappear altogether." As this new doctrine of magnetism spread, it was found that wounds inflicted with any metallic substance could be cured by the magnet. In process of time, the delusion so increased that it was deemed sufficient to magnetize a sword to cure any hurt which that sword might have inflicted. This was the origin of the celebrated weapon salve, which excited so much attention about the middle of the 17th century. With this salve, the weapon, after being dipped in the blood from the wound, was to be carefully anointed and then laid by in a cool place. In the meantime, the wound was to be duly washed with fair clean water, covered with a clean soft linen rag, and opened once a day to cleanse off purulent or other matter. The weapon salve continued to be much spoken of on the continent, and many eager claimants appeared for the honor of the invention. Dr. Flood, or Fluctibus, the Rosicrucian, was very zealous in introducing it into England. He tried it with great success in several cases, and no wonder, for while he kept up the spirits of his patients by boasting of the great efficacy of the salve, he never neglected those common but much more important remedies of washing, bandaging, etc. In the midst of his popularity, an attack was made upon him and his favorite remedy, the salve, which, however, did little or nothing to diminish the belief in its efficacy. One Parson Foster wrote a pamphlet entitled Hippocrisma Spongus, or a sponge to wipe away the weapon salve, in which he declared that it was as bad as witchcraft to use or recommend such an unguent, that it was invented by the devil, who at the last day would seize upon every person who had given it the slightest encouragement. Dr. Flood, thus assailed, took up the pen in defense of his unguent, in a reply called The Squeezing of Parson Foster's Sponge, wherein the bitter flames of his slanderous reports are, by the sharp vinegar of truth, corrected and quite extinguished. Shortly after this dispute, a more distinguished believer in the weapon salve made his appearance in the person of Sir Kenelm Digby, the son of Sir Everard Digby, who was executed for his participation in the gunpowder plot. This gentleman, who in other respects was an accomplished scholar and an able man, was imbued with all the extravagant notions of the alchemists. He believed in the philosopher's stone and wished to engage Descartes to devote his energies to the discovery of the elixir of life, or some other means by which the existence of man might be prolonged to an indefinite period. If such a man once took up the idea of the weapon salve, it was to be expected that he would make the most of it. In his hands, however, it was changed from an unguent into a powder, and was called the powder of sympathy. King James, the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Buckingham, and many other noble personages believed in its efficacy. The following remarkable instance of his mode of cure was read by Sir Kenelm to a society of learned men at Montpellier. Mr. James Howell, a popular author, coming by chance as two of his best friends were fighting a duel, rushed between them and endeavored to part them. He seized the sword of one of the combatants by the hilt, while at the same time he grasped the other by the blade, being transported with fury one against the other. They struggled to rid themselves of the hindrance caused by their friend. And in so doing, the one whose sword was held by the blade by Howell drew it away roughly, and nearly cut his hand off, severing the nerves and muscles and penetrating to the bone. The other, almost at the same instant, disengaged his sword and aimed a blow at the head of his antagonist, which Howell, observing, raised his wounded hand with the rapidity of thought to prevent the blow. The sword fell on the back of his already wounded hand and cut it severely. Seeing Howell's face all besmeared with blood from his wounded hand, they both threw down their swords and embraced him, and bound up his hand with a garter to close the veins which were cut and bled profusely. We must continue the narrative in the words of Sir Kenelm Digby. It was my chance to be lodged hard by him, and 4 or 5 days after, as I was making myself ready, he came to my house and prayed me to view his wounds. "For I understand," said he, "that you have extraordinary remedies on such occasions, and my surgeons apprehend some fear that it may grow to a gangrene, and so the hand must be cut off." In effect, his countenance discovered that he was in much pain, which, he said, was insupportable in regard of the extreme inflammation. I told him I would willingly serve him, but if haply he knew the manner how I could cure him, without touching or seeing him, it might be that he would not expose himself to my manner of curing, because he would think it, peradventure, either ineffectual or superstitious. He replied, "All that I have to say unto you is comprehended in the proverb, 'Let the miracle be done, though Mahomet do it.'" I asked him then for anything that had the blood upon it, so he presently sent for his garter, wherewith his hand was first bound, and as I called for a basin of water. I took a handful of powder of vitriol, which I had in my study, and presently dissolved it. As soon as the bloody garter was brought me, I put it in the basin, observing what Mr. Howell did. He started suddenly, as if he had found some strange alteration in himself. I asked him what he ailed. "I know not what ails me, but I find that I feel no more pain. Methinks that a pleasing kind of freshness, as it were a wet cold napkin, did spread over my hand." I replied, "Since, then, you feel already so much good of my medicament, I advise you to cast away all your plasters. Only keep the wound clean, and in a moderate temper betwixt heat and cold." After dinner I took the garter out of the water and put it to dry before a great fire. It was scarce dry before Mr. Howell's servant came running, and saying that his master felt as much burning as ever he had done, for the heat was such as if his hand were betwixt coals of fire. I answered that he should find ease in a short time, for I knew the reason of this new accident, and would provide accordingly. Thereupon he went, and at the instant I did put the garter again into the water, thereupon he found his master without any pain at all. To be brief, there was no sense of pain afterwards, but within 5 or 6 days the wounds were cicatrized and entirely healed. Such is the marvelous story of Sir Kenelm Digby. Other practitioners of that age were not behind him in their pretensions. It was not always thought necessary to use either the powder of sympathy or the weapon salve to effect a cure. It was sufficient to magnetize the sword with the hand, the first faint dawn of the mesmeric theory, to relieve any pain the same weapon had caused.